welcome. So if you followed the previous 4 tutorials, your file may not look quite like mine, and I can show you what I've done to this, or you can just download the Tentacle Octopus Manual Animate Start file. It's basically what we had. I've just cleaned it up. What I've done is gone in and removed the motion system, all the clips that we made. I did leave the clip on the original front joints chain. And of course the Spline IK, we're still going to use that. So let's clean up a few things from the previous tutorial. If you remember, we put these protection tags. We really need to remove those for this. So if you curl that open, and if your whole thing doesn't open, just hold down Control and it'll all open at once. And let's pull this down, and we're going to select this one first and select the last one by holding down Shift and clicking it, and just hit delete, and then we'll go up and delete that last one. And then you can fold those closed. The other thing that we need to get rid of, because we're not going to be using dynamics for this, we want to be able to manually animate this tentacle, and we're only going to do this front one. And so you want to come up, and this is your Spline Dynamics tag. Just delete that. This is the constraint tag. You can delete that, and then this spline constraint null. We're not going to use that, and so you can delete that. If you remember, if you followed along in the tutorial, if you go into the layers, remember we saved 4 sets of nulls. Okay, and these nulls corresponded to the joints, and so I'm going to middle mouse click that joint hierarchy, and remember how we aligned those joints so that Y was all facing up. Well, if I middle mouse click my nulls, you see that that's not the case. Now they will still work for what we're doing, but I think it's going to be easier to you can either delete all those if you want, or just hide them for now. And we're just going to create a new null hierarchy by middle mouse clicking this right front root and go up to character, convert, and come down selection to convert to nulls. Okay, and so that's going to give us hold Control to unroll that whole thing, and so that's going to give us a new null hierarchy. Everything's arranged one under the other, and if you middle mouse click that, you can see that your Y is up for these two. Okay, and so we are ready to start putting our rig together. So this next step is a little tedious and a little time consuming, but I mean it's fairly simple. So come down to your right front root joint and open that, and if it opens all the way, just close it to this joint where our Spline IK tag is. So if we go in here into the tag, we have that all set up, and that can really stay the same. But in here we have handles, okay? And so we're going to use this null hierarchy we created to create handles for this spline. And that way we can pull those handles to move this and animate this tentacle. So to get started, and I played around with this, and this really, you can do this however however you want, however crazy you want to make yourself. Okay, so what I did was I put a null at spaced it out with 2 joints in between, and that seems to work pretty well. So what you want to do is go in here, and we're going to leave these last 2. I can't remember if this one even works, but we're going to leave those last 2. So I'm going to select this one, I'm going to select this one, I'm going to skip one, I'm going to select this, I'm going to select this, and I'm holding down Command so I don't lose my selection. Skip one, select this, and skip one, select this. We're going to skip one, select this, and up here I started skipping more. So we've been skipping one. I'm gonna skip 2. No, that's not what I want to do. Let's for here. Let's still only skip 1 and select 2. We're still gonna only skip 1, but now we're gonna select 3. So I started selecting 3, 14, 13, 12. We're going to skip one, select. And you get the idea. And you can play around with this, and you may want even more control than what we're going to have. And so I'm going to leave, no, actually, yeah, I'm going to leave just 1 and 2 I'm going to take out. I'm going to leave 0 and, of course, the root. So with those all selected, just right-click and come down to Delete Without Children. That got rid of all of our nulls that we don't want and left the ones we do want in a nice hierarchy that we can use. And if you come up to this very top one, and middle mouse click, it's going to select those all, and we come down here and we see that we have 13 elements selected. So 13 is how many handles we're going to need in here. So if we go in here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Now there's a really important thing that we need to do here before we get too carried away, and that is we have our 13 spots in here for our 13 nulls in this null hierarchy that we just created. The problem we have is these nulls, each of these nulls has to correspond to an exact point on this spline. But if you remember, we created this spline for our dynamic rig. And this spline has a point at every joint. So if we start dragging these nulls into this tag, into these handles, it's going to distort the entire spline. So what we have to do is, let's turn our tracer object back on and go down to it. And it should still have this null hierarchy that we created originally. Well, this is one of them from our layer palette. So let's take all those and delete all of those out of there. And then go ahead and lock it. You probably wouldn't have to. And then middle mouse click this, the new null hierarchy we just created, and drag it in here. And now we should have a point for each null to control. Okay, and so we come to this tracer. Let's make sure connect all objects. This should all be the same. So once we've got these set up, check this. You want to leave this at linear and none for right now, because we have to. The spline needs to be made with the exact amount of points on it that we have nulls, number of nulls. So if you right-click on the tracer object and come down to current state to object, we'll create a new spline. You can turn the tracer off. And let's just rename this Manual Animate. Okay. So one last thing we need to do to get this to work, well, there's a lot of things we need to, but one thing we have to do that's real important is click on your IK Spline Tag, and you notice that we still are referencing the spline that we use for our dynamic setup. So you want to take this new one, Manual Animate, and drag it into that field. Now we have that spline is going to correlate to these joints. It already is. So the only thing, the only thing we need to do now is to go ahead and set up our handles. We have our spaces, so roll this open. And you want to start the root at 0, and so you can just click and drag each joint into its spot. It's not going to, the index number is not going to match up, correspond with the null number. We probably do want to change those null names from joint. And that doesn't matter if you want to go in and change those to correspond just for your own clarity, that's fine. But it doesn't affect the rig at all. And I am going to change these names just so we don't get confused here later. I'm already confused. 27, 30, okay. And there we go. Okay. And so we can click out of there, we can go on here, and let's go ahead and middle mouse click that and go to your tools, naming tool, and we're just dump that out, and we're going to replace, let's see, we're going to replace joint. Joint with, oops, probably should need to spell that right, joint with I'm going to do all caps on the null. Okay. Okay, so that's all cleaned up. Now the one other thing we need to do is we need to be able to see these handles. So if you come into your Object tab, I middle mouse click because I want to change this whole hierarchy of nulls at once. If you come into your Object tab of that null, of those nulls, and come down to, I'm going to put a sphere, I just like it better, and I'm going to put XZ and just bring this up a little, and you can, if you want, and I did this before, made some of these lower ones smaller. So let's go in, before we do that, let's go in and before we deselect them, let's put this to on, and let's make this green. Okay, and then if you roll in here and say maybe from about, let's see, about there, the white ones are what I'm selecting, and I'm just going to make them a little bit smaller. And then maybe these two, a little in between that, and these two, and okay, we're getting on the crazy side now. Okay, and so if I click away, you can see they're all green, and you could make them different colors if you want to, but I don't know that that would help. It could. Actually, see these last two? I'm going to go in and make those smaller still. Maybe this last one really small, and I can't remember if that one does much at all. It just makes it a little easier later as we're animating to grab these without having the other one in the way. One more little bit. That's good. I do want to explain something before we start animating. This is the way I played around with this when I first figured this out. And I prefer to have these nested one under the other, but they don't have to be. They could all be separate and it will still work. The problem is that if they're separate, you have to move each one each time. And essentially I'm doing the same. But I like being able to move a joint and the joints downstream from it move with it. Anyway, it's a personal preference. It'll work both ways. So let's go ahead and start working on this. Now, one thing we do want to do is want to middle mouse click all the nulls and go into your coordinates thing. And let's freeze all these coordinates because we want to be able to make sure that these get back to 0 whenever we need them to. So with that, and we might want to go ahead and with position and rotation selected, go ahead and put a keyframe at 0. So we're going to go, I'm going to go to the end of this. I have 300 frames in here. And I did find it was easier to animate from start to end. Okay, put like an end position, kind of where you want this to end, and then start dividing it up. Say go to 150, and then make a movement. Then and do it that way. Or you could go to say 60 to start with, and then 120, and so on. But we're going to try it this way. And see how this works. Anyway, you get the idea. This is not going to be a great animation. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with it. But I do want to turn on the auto keying, and it will save me a lot of, save you a lot of time as well in so you don't have to keep remembering to come in and set these keys. So I'm going to turn on auto keying and come in here and just grab this null. And I'm going to do this kind of quick. I don't want to spend a lot of time. And you see there's something kind of funky happening, and we're going to fix that in a minute. Let's keep this down here and take this back down. And you can do whatever you want with this. I'm just setting this in position, and you can do this however you want. And I did find too that stretching some of these nulls out, in other words, and when you want to, I'm still in point mode. When you select these, I just found it easier just to kind of slide over them a little bit, And that's what I mean by pulling them out. It really gets a very lifelike movement to them by stretching them out a little bit. And we're going to just stop right there. Now you see what's happening, how kinky it looks and everything. That's not really that great. Well, that's just an issue with our spline. And so if you go into the spline, and let's deselect that so we don't set any more keyframes. So you go into the spline and go into the object. Now we can change this to B-spline, and right away it's going to smooth things out. And then I do like to go in and put natural, and 8, the default 8 works pretty well. So right now we've got this kind of animation going on, and that's okay, you know, it's got something happening. So this time though, I think I want to go to about 150, and I'm going to turn auto keying back on. And I'm going to start doing an opposite move. Now, you see what happened there. I actually selected I think I've got the whole octopus selected and that null. So that's not going to work. So you got to kind of slip in. For some reason, I cannot get in. There we go. So we're just going to pull this up, pull this down. I don't think I have it right. It should, your axis should end up right in the center of that null, or it's not right. Okay, so I'm going to put some intermediate moves on this now. Let's see what we have. We have keyframes at 0, 60, 150, 220, and of course at the end. So I'm going to go to 60, and you really want to make sure you're on 60. You want to be on your other keyframes. At least you don't want to be one. You could be at 30 or something in between, but you don't want to be one keyframe apart, or you will get a jump in there. So we're going to turn the auto keying back on, and go back to that. And we're gonna. Now I'm just want to move some things to the side, so it's not so so regular the way we've had it. Because the octopus movement, if you check out some videos online, these tentacles, well, the whole body really is quite amazing, the way they move. And then, of course, we can grab this root and move it around as well. Okay, I'm going to turn this off and go to 150. Make sure I'm right on 150. And this time I want to try to pull this whole tentacle back in towards the body. And I'm just playing here. I don't know how this all will work. You got some crazy. I'm gonna try to zero out all these. That zero out. Okay. And so you have to be kind of careful, because some of these there we go. And this is why I like, now you can use the world mode, if that really doesn't help any. This is why I do like having all the nulls in under that same hierarchy, because now as I pull these back, I'm pulling everything back that's down the line from the one I'm pulling. And I don't know why, we get some crazy movement on these. If you're getting too much movement, you could play around with some of the settings in the IK Spline Tag, or you can try rotating some of these. That doesn't always work though. And sometimes they just get too close together or too far apart from their original position. So we're going to go there, And then turn this off. I get nervous about that thing being on. And then come up to 120. I want to make sure that I'm, no, that's, yeah, 120, that I'm right on that. Turn the auto keying back on. And let's get this one. Oops. So I think that's going to be good enough. We've already got our last key set, so I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to go back to 0, and I am going to filter out the nulls and deselect that one. And so let's just see how this is looking. And we didn't really put a whole lot of side movement on, but you can see you get some, but see you got some kinking there. And you would probably have to just go in and smooth that out. And again, let's go look at our spline tag, IK tag. And in the tag, you see this twist. I have had some luck. The world mode seems to work best when we're using the dynamic aspect of this. But I have changed this to object, and you saw that smooth out, and it does seem to work a little bit better. I'm not familiar with what each of those modes really does. But you can see that I'm getting a lot less of that twisting and compression that we had originally. And that's interesting that I just noticed at the end frame at 300, I don't remember us leaving that up like that. And it may be, I'm going to actually grab this null and rotate that down. I don't like that ending up in the air like that. And see, and you could go in and see at the end, it's the whole thing is basically straight again, and that probably wouldn't be the case. I mean, you want as much variation in that as possible. Anyway, so let that play again. And I would definitely start putting intermediate movement in there too, to get more realism. Like right here at 60, there's almost a stop. It almost stops and then starts a new movement, which is okay. I mean, they do all kinds of things, but I would probably mess around with that and move these keyframes around a little bit and such. So the next thing we want to do is to be able to bake that movement that we've just spent, the last few minutes creating, so that we can use it again and we can mix it up, and we want to make a motion clip from it. So we have a couple of ways to create a motion clip from this animation that we just created. And one is we can put a motion clip on this root, this null root, and bake those nulls, okay? And it will bake in all that movement, and of course it'll drive our tentacle. But a cooler way is to bake these joints, especially from here, because that way we can use these clips with the other clips, with the dynamic clips. So we can use the ones we've animated by hand, and we can mix those with the ones we used forces to animate. So basically it's the same setup. You want to come in here, click off, and then you want to hit Alt-A to get rid of that. Then I'm going to middle mouse click, and we're going to have to leave this joint off because we didn't make allowance for it. Because this, if we're going to use the motion clip, we have to use it from the joint that the motion clip lives on in order for the other clips to work as well. So I'm going to middle mouse click that. I can see that they're all selected. I'm going to take that and I'm going to drag it right into the dope sheet here. And then I'm going to go up to Functions and Bake Objects. Position, we want position and rotation this time, 0 to 300. And you can deselect Create Copy and Clean Tracks. And I'm going to hit OK. Give this a second. And then if we go into our F-curve manager, you can see we have animation. And let's take our IK Spline Tag. I'm going to just drag this into here and show always. And I'm going to deselect that because we don't want the nulls and the spline IK fighting this animation that we've just baked to the joints. Okay, so then when we hit this, I'm going to deselect those joints. Now you can see that the spline is just laying there because it's no longer doing anything. Now it's all the joints. And now we have a joint animation that we can now take and go to here. I'm going to actually dump this tag. So with the joint selected that the spline IK tag is on, come up to Animate and come down to Add Motion Clip. And pretty much you can leave it just the way it is. We'll hit OK. And then we have our motion clip right here. And I think I had it set. Yeah, it cleaned all the animation off the track. So now that's just the motion clip. And again, we can do like we did before. If we want to speed it up, change it by the using the spline. Just that first part isn't great. Pull it out so it's slower. Right at 60, we have a kind of a weird jump. And probably the reason is because I went from 60 to 150. It was too big of a jump. There probably needs to be some more keyframes at, say, 90 or 100 or so in there. But you get the idea. So now that we have that motion clip in there, let's add one of our older motion clips and just see if it's going to work. I'm going to grab B. This is one of the ones we created from the previous tutorials. And I'm going to take the one that's in there and get rid of this. We don't need that. I'm going to take the one we just made and I'm just going to pull it down the line a little bit. And then I'm going to take B and stick it in behind this one and give a little crossover. So, all right, so let's see. And even though we didn't bake the position into that clip, it does seem to still be working really well. So we could even take this front part, since that, let's stop this. Since the other clip does seem to be a faster clip to begin with, let's just start this about here. Let's just start at 0. And so we should get a fast movement there. And then now it's starting to go into the crossover and right into the other movement. And that's the cool thing about these motion clips, is you can make a whole bunch of these before you even start, animating in your scene, because the thing is, and I didn't show you this before, but let's say you take this octopus null and let's go ahead and drop a keyframe right there, and yeah, that's good. And then we'll move him, and maybe give a little bit of rotation. And I'll just do that. That's enough. And then you'll get the ideas. So if you have all these tentacles moving and he's moving, and of course we didn't even animate the head or anything, you can get some pretty cool results. Okay, so that's how to animate manually and combine it with the dynamic.